Today on the Videomaker podcast, we talked to Niel Guilarte. Niel is an award-winning producer, editor, speaker, and coach, but he's also the host of the All Things Post podcast. We talked to him today about basically running a business, making wedding videos, and we talk a lot about post-production and software and the like. I think this is a really great conversation. I hope you learn a lot. As always, if you've been listening to the show and you like it, we'd love it if you went to iTunes and gave us a 5-star review and hit that subscribe button. Or if you're on Stitcher, hit subscribe. If you're on, Spotify, you hit the little heart button or the follow button. It's really helpful for us and hopefully more convenient for you. It'll deliver the podcast right to your mobile device every week. So with all that stuff out of the way, let's get on to our conversation with Niel Guilarte. Welcome to the Videomaker podcast. I'm Mike Wilhelm, and with me, as always, across the table is Chris Monlux.
How's it going?
And today's special guest, Niel Guilarte. Niel, how's it going?
Very good. Thank you for having me.
Good. So, Niel, most of our audience may know you from, your podcast, All Things Post. But actually, before we dive into post-production and all that, maybe you could just sort of give us, the bird's eye view of how you got into video and film and what did it take to get to where you are today?
Well, thanks for asking. And it's actually kind of a unique story. What was funny was I started when I was about 16 or 17. And the very first tool I ever used, ironically, was Videomaker magazine. At the time, I didn't have access to any schooling or anything. And it was the only magazine I could find as a kid. And it literally taught me the basics of what to do. And then, I'm basically self-taught from that time. So I, bought what the magazine suggested, right? And you know better. But then over time, over the many, many years, I got into video production and have been everywhere. I went to California for a while, worked out there. But essentially, I ended up moving to Orlando in about 1988, and I stayed there and just my video journey began there. But around couple of years ago, I ended up being the video producer for the city of Orlando, for the mayor of Orlando and the city of Orlando, which is where I got the bulk of my, training, I guess you could say. And then since then, started Wild Style Media officially, completely solo in 2013 here in Tampa. And it's gone from there. Had a documentary most recently on Amazon about podcasting called The Messengers. And in 2014, started podcasting with All Things Post. So it's kind of been a long journey. But I always like to say it's kind of full circle talking to you guys just because it was the very first thing I ever, and now to be here with you guys, it's just kind of fun, kind of cool, full circle moment, I guess you can call it.
Yeah, I think the three of us are kind of in the same boat. We're all probably about the same age, when back in the 90s and the early 2000s, Videomaker was kind of it. So yeah, it was like the only thing of its kind at the time for sure. So you got started in Orlando, and at the time, were you doing basically were you a jack of all trades? You were doing all kinds of production, or were you really focused just on post there?
Yeah, no, listen, when I first started, it was basically the one-man band. I started with whatever I can get my hands on, right? Weddings and any events. Those were the easy things. But as I got more into it, I really started moving more into music videos and then to short films. I got a lot of people making the short films. They didn't have an editor. So I specialized in that, even though originally I wanted to be more the director or the DP. But because of the need in Orlando at that time, there just weren't a ton of editors. So I decided to focus my attention on that. And then that sort of grew more and more over time in post. But I've always done short films and have always worked on really great projects. I got to work on some smaller television shows back when Orlando had production before it was sent back to California. So just a lot of varied experience, but originally in the event videography is kind of how it all got started.
Uh-huh.
Well, we've actually had a couple guests that have been on that were in the industry in Florida, and it's it totally is great locations and of course big enough cities and all that kind of stuff. But there's so much talent in the area as well. It's interesting thinking about that, but it makes sense that there would be for us being that we're in California, we think of Hollywood, of course, but that when you're on the East Coast, there's quite a few different places. It's not just New York that are producing high quality content.
Oh, yeah. And before coming here, I was actually from Southern California. I was out in Cypress, California. That's where I got bit by the bug, And then when we moved to Orlando, I had to make it happened in a place that at the time didn't have much going on. So I've been there through much going on, and then back with everything leaving. What led me here to Tampa was basically that I wanted to be more than just a videographer, right? So I started doing podcasting, which led to speaking and coaching opportunities. And then All Things Post was really just a platform for post-production people to have a voice. I always tell people, you watch the credits, you see all those credits of all those amazing creators, but you don't have an idea who they are. You only know the director and maybe the big actors. And that was really what kind of led me to work with just so many different people, film societies. And again, we did our documentary, The Messengers, which was really sort of the biggest thing because it was there for 2 years and it got a lot of exposure. So, and that was all done in Final Cut, which was at the time, not cool. So I've always kind of been that guy, right? I'm always working in the tools that maybe everyone doesn't say is the best at the time, but I make the best of it. So it's been a really exciting journey and been in post now since 1990. So it's been a long road.
That's awesome. I think post is being like a really great place for beginners to jump into because most people have computers, right? So you can start making things and start trying to do, things in post that would take a lot to, shoot yourself. And of course, now with the huge amount of stock media and even just media available for anyone, you can start, doing a really high quality edit. You can start doing, special effects and all those things, in the box at home without a crew, it's a great place to start learning the craft just because most people have a computer already that they can, jump into. I guess if you want to shoot, you can have your phone, which is a great entry level spot, but that it always seems like a great place. I know for myself, I could make better quality stuff as an editor than I could as a DP at first. It took a lot of editing to go, oh, okay, I shouldn't shoot it that way. This is, that really, they helped inspire each other, but it took a lot of post to really go, oh, okay, this is what I really need to do when shooting. And it's made me a better shooter for everything I edit. But that the editing side of it is like I guess it's the consideration of the product that you make when you're out in the field. It's like, okay, is this something I want to use? Whereas you're thinking when you're shooting, oh, this is magical. I love this. This turned out really great. But as a shooter, it doesn't really matter if it's beautiful, if it's not helping the story. And so it's an interesting thing to be able to learn from, learn shooting through the editing process or learn, even I think the idea of having to do some creative grading and that kind of stuff. I think that really teaches you how to capture it right, because not everything can be, can have that look unless it was captured the way you want it. So it's a good place for jumping off for sure.
Yeah, one of the things that I think I benefited from when over 30 years doing this now is that I started as a one-man band, so I was able to appreciate what I wanted to delegate. And then as I grew and work with crews and production crews and saw how having the independent talents, what that adds to a production. And then when I moved into post, I felt like all those years of shooting and directing and working with others is what made me a really good editor, because I was not that editor that can't take any criticism or, oh my God, they made a change to my work and now I don't like it. And so that collaborative life is what I felt made me a more reasonable editor to deal with on the bigger pictures. And now to see how the world has kind of gone back to sort of the one man, or technology's allowing you to go back to being a one man band, and even better than I ever was. It's really kind of been, like I said earlier, a full circle thing. But I just feel that to be an amazing editor, at some point you need to get a camera in your hand or be with a director, and vice versa. A lot of people are now editing that were DPs or directors only. And I just think we're not in a position anymore where you can isolate yourself and do just one thing. And especially as we move more into mobile post and the cloud and everything becoming so easy, where do you draw from, right? What well do you draw from as far as experience, regardless of how easy technology allows it to be?
Well, the fact that the technology is so easy is like a double-edged sword, right? It's super easy in that anyone can get into it, but the downside is anyone can get into it, which means competition is super, super high. And so it seems like if you are getting into post and you're like, I'm just going to be an editor and I'm going to learn how to edit, and that's where it ends. Well, a lot of people learn how to edit. Anyone can get the Resolve for free on their computer. There's lots of free resources for learning on YouTube and all that. So it seems like if you want to build a career, you really do have to have your hands in a lot of things, or at least have knowledge of a lot of things to give you the leg up.
Yeah, I always felt like the one-man band thing made my communication to the others when I'm working in a bigger team better, right? Like I know how to communicate to a lighting designer if I'm trying to achieve something because I've done it. And it's like, okay, this is what I'm doing. The communication is going to be easier. Now, of course, that could make you a tyrant, I guess. It could make you wanting to have it exactly your way. I always find that it's always, well, especially because I shoot by myself so much. It's really refreshing to get to shoot with somebody else and have their opinion heard and be like, oh no, that's a better direction. Let's go in that way. And having people, working with people with specialties is great. That's always a fantastic thing. If someone's really just an editor, well, they're going to beat me probably by 50% in the amount of time that they've been editing, just because all they've been doing is editing, and I've been doing editing and shooting and all the other aspects, the amount of time you spend on it. But that communication is so key to executing the vision, or that communication of whatever you're trying to achieve. We get so caught up in like, okay, we want a good story in a narrative film, but like a commercial, a wedding, those things need good communication as well. They need to be clear. They need to be understood. They need to have a good, storyline or arc that is going to make it more enjoyable for the viewer. And so I think that, the one-man band, it's so tempting these days because, you could have a laptop and a small mirrorless camera, and you could travel the world making videos for people and do high-end work and all that kind of thing. But it's such a pleasure getting to work with others that know what they're doing, but that it's so nice, especially when you go and you can communicate clearly to them. Not only do they get it, but then it's like they go, oh, but what about this? And you're like, oh, that's great. Not only did you take my idea, but you're able to take it to the next level. And that's a really exciting moment when you have a vision for something and you're able to help. If you're able to communicate, I always found that really difficult at first. I was like, I had this thought in my head, but how do I get you to understand and the people around me to understand that this is the vision we're going for? And I think as you do it, you find the importance of that communication, of like what part of the communication matters to this expert, or whoever's doing the lighting or DP or directing, whatever it is, that communication is going to strengthen all of that. And like I said, I love working in teams for two reasons. One, I think that the product always ends up being better when you have more minds on it. But also, if it sucks, I can not own it as much, right? I can go, oh, well, I just wrote the script. I didn't execute it, or whatever it was.
I love that you took it there, Chris. For a couple of things you said that if it's okay if I touch on. Number one is on All Things Post, we talk a ton about the power of being a good communicator. And I know by default that a lot of introverts that work in post are not good communicators. They're great executors, right? They like to execute the dream, the vision of someone else that wrote something else, told them what to do, et cetera, et cetera. And a lot of my mantra, I guess I should say more like my vision for post people, is I love to try to excite them to be better communicators so that they can tell a better story, not necessarily just be reactionary and always create what someone else has envisioned. So that's the first thing you touched on that I love, was just that, and that not everybody is a good communicator. And so what happens is they end up falling back into posts where they don't have to be a good communicator, where I try to encourage them instead to improve on their communication skill so they don't necessarily have to fall back. It could be a choice. And then the second thing that you said, which is amazing, is the whole working in a team is, listen, I've been a one-man band most of my career, but whenever I hire for Wild Style Media or I take on a production of any sort, the very first thing I want to do is, and I try to do within budgets, is to get a separate person for everything, because I still love old school movies where one guy does one thing really well. And I've gotten a lot of thank yous from people just for getting them work. But sometimes it's that one-man band guy that actually does the most for me, because he's had to do so much with so little, that we're able to get more of that, that raw juice in the production. But literally coming back to what you started with, it's just literally all about being a great communicator, whether you're on the front directing or just being able to communicate our life in post, which is very technical. So yeah, I couldn't agree with you more. I think what matters today, though, is it's becoming really, really easy. And when things become easy, kind of like even music production, I used to DJ. Right now, everybody DJs. And I always tell people, sometimes just because you have the gear doesn't make you a DJ. And just like in editing and film, it's just getting so simple. And then that's flooding the market. And that's what's been sort of changing the paradigm of owning a production company is competing with that. But the podcast really does focus more on what you were saying, which is just being an amazing communicator, because that's how good stories get told.
I saw a really good meme, and it was like you can always find it for cheaper, and it was a picture of the Mona Lisa and then like a drawing by like a kindergartner in crayon and stuff, and it's like, oh, they're both people. But you get what you pay for. I mean, and it's so easy to fall into the trying to be competitive at the bottom. And like, oh, I want to get this work. I'm going to try to compete with those that are thinking about just doing it for cheaper or whatever. I always hated getting the work where someone might go, well, maybe I'll get my nephew to handle this. And it's like, I probably shouldn't have been part of this project. Because, it's like, well, you should want an expert doing this. You should want the product to be the best it can be. I mean, that's why I get excited when I can work with other people. It's like, oh, cool. I know that the job that they're doing is going to be focused on, like you're saying, like if you have a boom operator, like the mic's going to be, hopefully, I mean, if someone's executing their job, the mic's going to be in the right place. You're not going to have to do as much sweetening in post or doing any kind of work with the audio if the mic was placed correctly and the levels were set well and all that kind of stuff that makes the post able to go that next level instead of going, oh, I'm going to have to fix this or that's good enough for what I'm doing or whatever. It's like, no, this stuff can actually go to the next level, which I think is a really, it's interesting how no one has to be actually very good at anybody else's job, but just understand how they work. Like I don't know how many times I was on shoots and it was like, having, and this was like small crew and having a salesman that was there, that was the producer for the project. And, just their ability to go, oh, hey, their collars popped up. Just having another set of eyes that knows how everything's going is like, oh, that was helpful. I would have to reshoot this because that collar was popped. Cool, let's fix that, and being able to have those around what's important so that even if it's not their job to handle it, they can call it out and help if, there's any shortcoming or anything like that.
Well, I'd love to give one short example before we move on. Is exactly, I want to just really touch on what you just said. So I'm a victim of my own success. I shot an entire documentary with just me traveling the globe, went to Guatemala, went to Puerto Rico, went all over the place with a DSLR and a Zoom audio source. And I had to work within a very restricted budget. And I had all the tools and I had all the crew. And unfortunately, a lot of times what I think forces people more into a one-man band is the decreasing budgets and people thinking that because an Osmo Pocket is small, I can hire that guy now, or that's more affordable, just shoot it with a GoPro. And they don't realize that then they end up hiring me in post to try to fix all that or to undo all that, or hire me and pay me even more to try to mimic the look. And so I couldn't agree with you more. The other thing too is, listen, I've made a life going on 30 years now doing this, of shooting everything cinematically. I could care less if I was shooting a wedding. I used to joke around and say, you're going to get a Disney wedding out of me, even if you paid me $100 or $10,000. It was because I always from day one just wanted one day someone's going to see my work. Right now I have a 6-year-old and that could be her. So the point I'm trying to say is that I've always been cinematic. And even though I never let that go due to budgets, a lot of people benefited more because I wasn't lessening my quality for their budget. But at the same time, it stung me in the long run in the sense that I would put so much effort into stuff, even though I wasn't getting the payout. And the only one that got hurt there was me as far as ROI. So I just encourage people out there, I love what you just said about sometimes you want an expert. There still has to be a dividing line of where you go from a great production to a serious production, and that's a budget, and there's no way around it. And I really feel that people just need to learn to know what they want before they hire, so that whether to get an accomplished one-man band or a great crew, because it could be the difference between your stuff getting picked up and distributed or not.
Totally.
I think that there's like an element also, especially when we're talking about weddings and the like, where just the mere fact that you've been doing it for a long time and you can pick up any camera and make it look great can put you ahead of whatever your competition is at the time, right? Like you could give your 17-year-old nephew a C300 and say, go shoot this wedding, and it's going to be garbage. Meanwhile, Niel here can pick up the Osmo Pocket or a mobile phone, and it's going to look like a movie. And I suspect that I don't do weddings, but I suspect that a lot of people who get married, they look at some of that footage and they've seen other wedding videos, and maybe it's one person with an Osmo Pocket or a GoPro or a drone or all three, but they don't know. I mean, that they just see that as a great piece of work, even though there isn't, a whole crew behind it and a bunch of effort that goes into it. And so a skilled and experienced shooter can do something kind of effortlessly that a lot of people are impressed with.
Oh yeah, you're 100% right. When I was a kid and started my business, like literally, kid, 17 and 18, and I opened up my first office as a kid, not as an adult. I just wanted in and I was willing to do it. My very first account I ever got was Disney Event Group Weddings. Okay, so we basically did the weddings. And then over time, they replaced me with robotic cameras. And I've been competing with this obviously for 30 years of the replacement of a pro for something affordable and fixed. And we just had to keep adapting. And then the storytelling switched from shooting the weddings amazingly well to cutting them amazingly well. Mm-hmm. And I think that was an amazing training for us to become solid producers, regardless of whether we had the entire pie of shooting and editing or just the post. And so I couldn't agree with you more as far as an experienced person could do something amazing. But I think what's happening too is people just always want to avoid, and I think this is in any industry, not just production, you just don't want to pay a lot for something anymore, right? There's just been so many opportunities for everyday, one-stop shop, animations pre-made everywhere. You don't got to make them anymore. Cars are becoming the same way. But at the end of the day, I'm kind of a stickler. I drive a 99 Jag for a reason. It's still a Jag. It doesn't matter how old it is. And I'm a person that believes in, if I want a really good car, I'm going to go buy a really good car. I'm not going to expect that out of a Hyundai Sonata. You know what I'm saying? So what I'm trying to say is to this day, you still have to care and know at what level you want this to be executed and then cut the check for that, because that determines the level of pro that production company can hire to deliver your vision. So it's a struggle in this industry to do more for less, but at the same time, when do you demand, look, just give me more so I can give you more?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's, it's so interesting because I always find, especially like in the wedding videography, of like, what's the add-on? What's the upsell that they're telling the client or whatever of what's the thing that they matter? I remember at one point it was, that a drone was included. That was, a big thing when drones first started happening. No, cool, we can have a couple bird's eye views of the location or whatever. Now it's going to be, motorized gimbal. It's all of the tools because they're all now available at the lowest end, where as it used to be only on the high end. And what that would cause though is that like back in the day, it would be that you had someone always making something that they, to the best of their ability for what they're doing. I mean, whatever it's going to be. Whereas now you can get it done and just get it done. It can have a function instead of a form in that way. It doesn't take a creative mind to just have it, I captured the moment. Cool, that's fine. But that you get what you pay for. You manage expectations. If people are just like, oh, I just want to be able to look at this and remember some stuff. Cool. I can throw some cameras in the corner, let them roll. You can watch them all, but man, would that be boring? You really wouldn't want to watch that footage back. But for the bride and groom, maybe that's what they wanted, right? But really, what you want is something someone wants to watch over and over again. At least I think that's what most people are looking for, because they're thinking of what they might see on TV or just anything that's nicely produced. But that it's about managing those expectations. So if they were just expecting to communicate what the day was like so they could watch a highlight reel every once in a while, cool, pay for the montage and we'll just get a bunch of beautiful shots. But then there's but we want to see the ceremony and all those different parts, little upsells that but it's a storytelling upsell. It's not a equipment, it's not even a well, I mean, sure, it's going to be how you technically execute what you're doing, but with that vision up front, you can do those things. But that it's like that 4K would be an upsell when I don't. For me personally, I don't think 4K is worth paying more for if it's just more resolution. If the image is the same in either one, like really, you're going to need to see that much detail in the things, and of course, some projects need that. But it's like, it comes down to, it reminds me of like a lot of live streaming now, is that like, it's truly about people experiencing the event now. It's not about making an event that's a streamable thing, but it's like, oh, churches or anybody's going to hire you for a live stream or something like that. They're looking for just for it to exist on the internet. And so people can get and see it and experience it because we're not allowed to be together as much. And so, but managing those expectations, it's like, well, would it be served? Would that project be served by being overly cinematic, or by having a glide cam operator, or those kinds of things? It's like, oh, that might not be the place where you put the budget in. You go, oh, we're going to put the budget in, maybe it's a roaming camera or whatever the thing's going to be. But there's a lot of ways to slice up your budget to make the production work that isn't always like, I'm going to give you the newest technology, or it can be upsell in story, or the execution, or those kinds of things. I mean, let's face it, especially for weddings, people aren't super educated in all the different things. So they're going to buy off your menu regardless of what it is. And I think that's the thing.
On more resolution or things like that, ended up not having any real ROI for them. They don't know any better. They don't know the difference between a Blackmagic or a 4K coming out of a DJI. I don't know. But I constantly have to battle at owning a production company. The reason why people are, back in the day, we used to do a lot of motion graphics. That was the upsell. And then now you can go to Videomaker, you download the thing. So, we're always trying to compete with why the execution of a pro or a creative that has had a lot of experience is the value add. It's not the fact that I can just download a template. It's the fact that even if I download the template, I can customize all of it and make it, even more special, because I know your favorite color is a very perfect shade of blue. So you end up selling more the personal touches, the attention to detail, regardless of whether I'm using pre-made or I'm the one that's going to spend an extra 20 hours customizing the little sparkles in your title, whatever. So you're right. Selling them on resolution or gear, that died a long time ago for us anyway. Really spend a lot of our time on, it's about how I'm capturing it. It's about all the stuff I'm going to see you're never going to see, because I know how to see it when you don't. And it's all about, in the end, I know how to put it all together in the way you never would.
Yeah. And and you know what?
We're your team.
Well, and you'll know what has impact, right? Like, where to put, you're not going to put a whole bunch of time in that one thing that happens for 2 seconds. You're going to make sure to listen and go, how do I be impactful with this information, right? Like, good customer service is listening to your client and understanding what they like, finding out that perfect shade of blue. And I think that though, knowing those things, that's what one separates you. I think those are the other things that lead to recommendations, right? Like, as a business owner, recommendations are going to be, especially I think in the wedding world, it seems like every bride knows 2 more brides. So everybody's working on the information that the last person they know that got married is giving them. And so a lot of times it's what was your experience? What was the thing that was worthwhile? I remember getting advice of like, make sure to get the right photographer, but that was from somebody that their photographer ruined all their photos. So it's like, would you rather pay just a little bit more to actually have it? And I think the same thing with videography is like, a pro is going to know to remember to roll. Like, there's certain things that and I'm guessing it's because you've been bitten by it, because when you didn't know, you didn't roll, and then all of a sudden you didn't have it. That professional touch, I think a lot of times is that thing that makes the client able to gain pleasure that that you executed what they're trying to do, and a lot of times they might not be the best communicator. So it's going to be your job to pull that communication out of them to best understand what they're trying to achieve.
And they often don't know what they want. And like I was going to say, is whether it's real estate video or whether it's weddings, a lot of the compliments over time that we've got is just the attention to detail, or the biggest compliment we've ever got is that they didn't even know we were there. They didn't, you guys are, where were you? When did you get that shot? And how did you even know my brother-in-law was coming, in the 3rd limo? I never told you that. And a lot of things that I've always kind of really, with whoever we hired for any event, is care about everything as if it was yours. I've lost not too long ago both of my wife's parents. So every wedding I shoot, I always tell her, remember that one wedding? That was the last time we ever saw them together. Last time we saw them walking together, for example. So I always tell every shooter I've ever dealt with, shoot it as if some of these people may or may not be. Shoot it as if it mattered to you personally. And that's the biggest compliment, because you know what that does for the editor? You're just giving them good in, good out, great decisions in the front, great options in the back. You're now giving an editor an amazing set of storytelling tools where now he doesn't need to have so many transitions or effects, because a great shooter will provide some great transitional shots for you. And so really, I think at the end of the day, if you're a person out there that likes, for example, that you still follow a Videomaker magazine, because it gives you the how. so well, is to remember that it's all about the little stuff that then you hand to an editor that knows how to mine for little stuff, and that delivers big stuff on the outcome for whoever's the receiving end, the beneficiary of your video.
There's nothing better for an editor than to have more assets than you need. I mean, like, that's just the most pleasurable experience as an editor of like, I have this idea. Oh, I have this thing to execute this idea. You know, it's a really, I mean, I get excited and inspired by the stuff I'm working with. And it's always a nice thing if you shot it and you're like, oh, this is so beautiful, and you're patting yourself on the back. But as an editor, I can enjoy that regardless of who shot it, of like, oh, this is so beautiful. This is going to really take this edit to the next level. Or especially if it's like that keystone thing that's going to make you achieve that, whatever the thing you're trying to do. Like you're saying, good transitions, like, good natural transitions are awesome because they're, you don't think about them, but they're there. They're adding energy. The same thing with, being on location. I mean, I can tell you this much. It's hard being a wedding videographer and not being in the middle of stuff. Yeah. But I've seen so many photographers that are like up in the middle of a memory that like was not wanted and not appreciated by the event, whoever was putting on the event. And I understand it, because that's how you get the shot a lot of times, is like, I got to say the people in the audience don't matter as much as this record. But that's hard to balance when you're trying to, I think be tactful. And I mean, that's, if you had control over everything, you'd be like, yeah, say that I do again, please. But I didn't really believe it this time. And give it to me again. You're not going to get that. So those, in any event, I think that you have to follow the situation. If you're not in the story as you're capturing it, it's not going to show up in post. You're not going to just all of a sudden have this magical story if the shooter wasn't trying to tell it while they're capturing it.
Credited of everybody. Shout out to all the great shooters. I used to have this one guy, I won't say his name, but he used to tell me, I can't stand when you guys do these fake flares in your video editing, right? So he would take the time to aim that camera in just the right way to catch a real lens flare. Like, he would go through the effort and the extra headache, because it is one, to actually find the right angles, or he would literally bounce the light using a reflector. And when I would get his shots, it was literally like gorge. Like, I would just be like, oh my God, now I can go here, here, and here as an editor. Yeah. I don't have to transition with some dumb flare. He gave me a flare. Now I can go out of that flare into some other flare that he shot of the lake or whatever. And so shout out to those guys that take a few seconds in a busy day getting yelled at by everyone to still get great shots for the editor. Or they may be, like you said earlier, the one-man guy that's gonna edit it. But to pretty much bring it full circle, look, it's all about caring. At the end of the day, when I used to shoot back before I was the owner of the company and I was the little guy shooting for everybody's company, I used to listen to the bride, and she didn't even know. The whole time that camera was up in my shoulder, I was listening to everything she said. And she told me, oh my God, these shoes were given me by grandma. The minute she walked out, I shot those shoes without a slider as best I could, to give the shoe some star power. And then I would hear later in the editing, oh my God, I can't believe you got those shoes. How did you even know? And that what made them keep referring me was not that I was phenomenal. It's that I gave a crap and that I really paid attention to whatever little tiny details that they were saying on that special day that maybe they would never say on any other day. So just listen close if you're out there. And then for you guys that are editing, just be glad you have a guy that listens close, because that's going to give you a lot of amazing tools for you to deliver a great video at the end of the day.
So that's a skill that takes time to acquire, right? Like to get to the point where you can hear those things from, what's happening in the surrounding. The camera really has to be like an extension of your body, where you don't have to think about operating the camera. You don't have to think about your composition. That's just second nature. And you can pay attention to everything else that's going on in the world and make mental notes of like, okay, after this, I'm going to go back and I'm going to grab this other thing.
You're not kidding. I have been in positions when I worked for the mayor of Orlando where I'm recording him. I'm recording what they're asking me to record. But because of that skill of doing weddings for so long, I'm literally listening to the 3 commissioners standing to my left that are saying whatever means something to them. And I make sure that as soon as I'm done shooting this shot, I go grab a little taste of whatever it is they said. And 90% of the time when we were putting together the pieces later for the city government channel or whatever it was, I had some assets of exactly what meant something to those 3, which at the moment no one even knew about. So that came from weddings where I was listening to the sister-in-law, the mother-in-law, the aunt that flew in, and I better get Uncle Joe and whatever. That training came from caring about that. And that when I worked homicide video for the police, it mattered then as well. I'm listening to this and I'm listening to the detective saying what he wishes I would get. And it matters now when I do films. And I was in Guatemala in the middle of nowhere and I'm recording what the producer in Tampa told me, but I'm also listening to the needs of the subject I'm shooting in Guatemala. They're totally different needs. But when I got home to edit it all, I had a little bit from everybody and it allowed us to not just make the movie, but also make custom promos for the hotel we were at in Guatemala because I listened to all the little stuff he wished he could have if he had a cameraman from the US happening to be here. So again, I'll say it a million times, it's about listening, it's about caring, but then in the end, you still got to deliver the quality. Otherwise, you're not worth the money that you got anyway.
And I think that goes back to what we were talking about, like the professional, hiring the professional. The professional doesn't, especially if you're doing something that you've done a lot, right? So say a wedding, you know the shots that you're going to need for whatever, you do it enough times, you're going to, okay, I need the close up of the rings. I need, all the different little things. You're not pulling your shot list out every 5 minutes to go, oh, did I get this or did I get that? You're going off of that instinct, and then that frees you up because you're not looking at your notes to have a little extra time to do those things that you've been, on the ground and experiencing and seeing those extra things. It's so when I was making commercials, a lot of times you're working with the owner of a business, and I don't know how many times someone would have an idea while you're on the shoot, and they're always bad. I mean, it almost always were bad ideas, but the big thing was like, well, we shoot them anyway. Like, I mean, we're not going to go, no, we don't want to do that. Because every once in a while, maybe it was 1 out of 100. I think it was probably more frequent than that, but that it would actually work out. And maybe you weren't understanding what they were doing, or whatever you shot was able to do something in it. I always remember being like, I want to use this for something, or I want to be able to fit this in because, of course, the client will be excited that their idea made it. But, just including some of their idea or taking the morsel that's from there, that's like, okay, I have this little bit, I have this in the back pocket just in case it does work, instead of being closed-minded and saying no. I don't feel like people hire you to say no most of the time. Most people want yeses from you. Now, hopefully they're not taking advantage of you trying to do that, but that I think a lot of times, just having that open mind of being like, oh, I mean, let's capture it anyway, and hopefully it'll be something. Just that openness, I think, can go a long way to the experience of someone paying you for a paying video gig.
Collaborative spirit is key out there when you're doing that kind of work, and it will, and as you grow from, let's say, just event videography to other things that you want to work on as a DP or an editor, all that experience comes into play. When I was editing my first documentary, I was like this, shaking in my boots. They paid me extra. That's a level of income I've never had to do something that's going to be seen on Amazon by everybody. But all I relied on was the 29 years of editing everything else. And then I got less scared of the documentary, and I started applying Niel. And this is how I've always done this. And this is how I transition into storyteller when I want to get this mood in a wedding, or when I wanted that mood in a video that I did for a client that was corporate. Mood is mood. Technique is technique. And then once I did that, it eliminated fear, which is the paralyzing part. And you know what? Then I was open, like you said, to learn the documentary style of post, because I stopped fearing and started like, okay, I got this part. Now I just got to master like cinematic timing a little better, et cetera, et cetera. So listen, it's all about growth, and it's all about pulling from where you started. I think the one mistake I would say to maybe your listeners is that a lot of people feel they need to abandon a level of expertise to reach a new level of expertise, and it's the complete and utter opposite. You don't need to give up, that used to be a music producer to be a video editor, because there's a ton of what we do that is timed specifically to sound, and those skills are transferable. It's just about being open to whatever the new thing is you're trying to achieve, and then pulling from where you've been.
That's good advice, and maybe a good spot to take a quick pause, and we'll be right back. Videomaker has been the go-to website for video production professionals and enthusiasts since 1986. There's a reason a quarter of our audience has been following us for more than 10 years. Simply put, our content makes our audience better at producing video. For whatever level you're at, we have the content to get the quality of work where you want it to be. nobody knows this better than our Videomaker Plus members. With exclusive offers and access to courses, webinars, back issues, and the digital magazine, they're able to stay up on the top of their production game. So now we want our podcast listeners to get in on the exclusive access. For a limited time only, we're offering a $100 discount to our Professional Plus annual membership. That's 42% off the normal price. To claim this exclusive deal, go to videomaker.com/2020plus. That's videomaker.com/2020plus. PLUS, not the symbol. It only takes a minute to sign up, and you'll get immediate, unrestricted access to all of our content. Don't wait. This offer will not be around for long, and you just can't ignore the benefits. That's $100 you can save that can go straight to new gear, software, accessories, whatever you want for your production setup. Don't wait. This offer won't be around for long. Once again, claim your exclusive offer now at videomaker.com/2020plus. Okay, we're back. So, Niel, we've been talking a lot about sort of, working your way up through the industry and having the right skills for just about any type of media production. But maybe we could sort of segue into kind of the nitty gritty of post-production. So you mentioned, at the start of this discussion that you were using a Final Cut Pro, back before it was cool, or maybe after it was cool, but before it became what it is now. What's your current opinion on sort of the landscape of editing software that we have now?
Wow. And if I could just take 1 second, I would love to answer that by going backwards for a second. So when I first started, it was Avid. Right, I was certified an Avid editor. I was so proud I had my Avid jacket, and I used to walk around, and no one in the world cared but me. I was an Avid editor, right?
Yeah, it was a big deal.
And one day, a buddy of mine was doing a music video, and his little, at the time we would call him maybe a DIT now, but anyway, back in the day, it was just a guy with a laptop, and he was ingesting their music video footage on the set into a laptop, and I had never seen Final Cut in my life. So this is Final Cut 2. I'm not saying my age. And so anyway, that guy quit. So I show up on the set. He's like, "Oh my God, please help me. Please help me." And I'd never seen it. I'm an Avid guy, right? What is this little peon stuff? So anyway, I used Final Cut for the first time, and it blew me away. It blew me away how fast and the things that it did, blah, 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 blah. So then when I stayed with Final Cut until Final Cut X came out in like 2011, and the debacle happened, right? And I stayed with them instead of abandoning it to Premiere, which is what all my friends did. And I stayed through the entire transition. Now, mind you, I learned Premiere, learned Resolve. I worked on almost any kind, but I stayed with Final Cut. That was the one that I just felt was the best for me, for my workflow and the way I edit. Still there, even though I use a lot more Resolve now, but I'm still 90% Final Cut. So to answer your question, how I feel about the state of post-production is that I've been in it for so long that I've really come to realize that back then, when even the king of all tools, Avid, was around, and it's still a very big thing in Hollywood, it didn't end up mattering. I ended up making my documentary with Final Cut X, right? 10 versions improved from when it was the debacle. And what I've really come to realize is that it's about me, my stories telling, and what tool allows me, or let's call it a paintbrush, which paintbrush allows me to get the desired shading, color, and style that's going to win. If Vegas Pro does that, that's what I'm going to learn and go use. I have the same mentality with audio. I use Logic, but I was a Pro Tools guy back when I produced and DJed. But Logic's better for me. It just works for the way I work. And I feel that with all post-production tools, you are just a handyman, and you have to find the tool that lets you execute fast and good so that you can tell your story the way you want to tell it. And so there's just a lot going on. I just interviewed, the people from LumaTouch, and they've got all this amazing mobile editing that I'm going, oh my God, is that where we're going? But I stay with what works for me right now. And I'm sure that could change, and you have to be open to change. But listen, there's just all the tools pretty much do the same thing nowadays, unless you have very specific plugins that you live by.
Yeah, I think as someone in post-production, that like being able to use all of the tools, you know what I mean? Like, so if the project's in Final Cut, cool, you're able to interface and use Final Cut. I mean, if you're not getting to make the choice of what editor you're going to use, you're going to probably have an access to more work, right? If you're just able to go ubiquitously through whatever, if it's Resolve or Premiere or whatever, those are all great. And I think that, like you're saying, like some fit better, workflows better. Like I'd have to say Final Cut might be one of the fastest editors to cut on. If you're just doing a straight up, cut montage, documentary stuff where you're telling a story with one one line of video and audio, and you're going to do some overlaying afterwards and stuff. It's one of the most powerful in that you're just going to be able to go through and do that. But if you're doing some motion graphics and some other things, okay, well, maybe it would make sense to do more of the Adobe suite, right? You're in that world. And so it really depends on your pipeline, right? What's your workflow for the project? But like, it's interesting because we get asked this quite often. And like the answer for me is different depending on if you're asking me here working at Videomaker, or if it was like me owning a production company, or if I was advising someone else to buy something. Each one of those is different recommendation, and it's because of how is it going to be used. Now, it also has to do with that budget word, right? So like for me, I would choose Final Cut if it was my own production company, because they've given you how many updates for free, whereas everybody else charges you for a new upgrade or that kind of thing. So it was like, it cost you $300 in 2011, and you haven't paid a penny on video editing software in 9 years, whereas everybody else is paying $60 a month for the last amount of time. It would make some sense business-wise to not spend that extra amount of money and do other things. But then again, you don't want to be limited to the production you can do. So being able to do all those other things, all the others. And the good thing is, like you were saying, they're all so similar that really interfacing with them isn't, you're not going to jump in and be like, oh man, this is, we might as well be talking about, rocket science instead of what I actually know how to do. They all function similarly. And there's a little bit of getting used to of like, what's this operation called on this program, or what's this hotkey instead of that hotkey, or those kinds of things. But you'll get used to the workflow of those softwares. But I think it's really important for people to pay attention to what kind of work they need to do and how they need to get it done for the work they're doing. Because, not all work needs a fast cut. So those strengths, now given Final Cut's got a lot of other strengths, but like in this case, like, would it really matter if you're doing something else that doesn't need a fast cut? That's not going to be necessarily helpful, that tool. And I don't think most are choosing on a project by project basis of what they use, but it might be if those projects are coming from externally, right? If you're running the project, the whole thing yourself, then it's a whole different.
I learned the other ones like Premiere and Resolve because I was passing up work. I was getting to the point where I was only a Final Cut editor. Yeah. And then people would say, oh, but we started this working in LA in Premiere. You mean you don't know Premiere? And then I'd lose a huge paycheck. Yeah. And so what I started doing was trying to learn the basis of Premiere and the basis of Resolve because I liked the color. And what I realized was, okay, I like certain things from each one. Yeah. So, but then hands down, I have a little pride badge. It's now fading because I'm becoming an old man, but I loved, there was a time where Final Cut was absolutely, the world hated it. And I loved every single time someone said, you can't do this in Final Cut. I literally became the poster child for Wanna Bet. And then I cut a movie in it. And then I literally cut a song in it. I cut whatever in it. And I was like, I'm going to show you what it can do because it has absolutely nothing to do. A friend of mine did an entire award-winning film in iMovie. Okay. It took a ton of round tripping. It took a work and unnecessary headaches, but he was out to prove a point. So my point I'm trying to say is that even to a stubborn point, I think I stayed on there for that. But now, like you said, where you touched on the biggest thing is owning a production company. I need what costs me the least, can churn out the quickest reliably so I can get new work in as our main workhorse. And when we want to play serious, then I'll go to like Resolve and I'll do a lot there, or we use a lot of After Effects. But day to day, getting stuff in, there is no NLE I have personally used that's faster to me than Final Cut to get something in and get something out. Level of cute, pretty amazing. That now determines the different tool sets that may require you to go somewhere else. But getting something cutting it fast and getting it done, I have just felt that it sped me up a huge amount, which increases how many jobs I could take a month, which increases how much income I could then have from not myself, but also my team.
It's interesting because, we talk about, we assess the video editing platforms every year, multiple times a year. And we always look at Final Cut and we look at Premiere and we look at Resolve and we go, well, where are the updates to Final Cut? Like you see Premiere push out all kinds of crazy bells and whistles. They like seemingly put out magic in a lot of cases. And lots of new updates. And Final Cut is like they put out these small iterative little updates, fixes here and there, maybe modifications to workflow or whatever, but really minor stuff. And it's interesting that Final Cut Pro has been able to hold on to a conglomerate of people who just love Final Cut Pro. And like you said, they could do anything with it, even without all the extra bells and whistles that the other applications are putting into it. It kind of speaks to what does editing actually require. And really kind of this workhorse application has been able to hold its own among, these, Final Cut and Resolve, which are throwing, the kitchen sink at the software. And yet Final Cut Pro sticks around.
I love that you touched on this. And if I may for a second, I want to jump on this too. I just really love that you hit this topic. So what happens is with me, like a lot of people have always told me that, why do you stay with them when there's another 50 updates last week just from Adobe? And listen, Logic just got its first update and God knows how long. I've been using it for a decade. I think they just now became the Ableton, right? So like they just now gave me enough to upgrade to anything cool. But what happened is that I tried to, instead of edit well in Final Cut, I tried to master Final Cut. And that way I could pull whatever I needed from AE, from other tool sets and bring them in versus trying to have everything works in a suite like I used to have back in the old Final Cut days and with Premiere, where everything is, within. But I have found huge benefit personally in mastering something so I could do the 80 percentile of what I need to do very fast. And then I could spend, like Chris was saying, the quality time when it's not required to be fast in other stuff and bring it all in and then composite amazingly. And so although you could argue that doing that within a suite is more efficient, and to some degree, okay, fine, I can go within AE to Premiere, I get it. I just found more benefit to mastering something, and I didn't require it to have a lot of change because the stuff that I was wanting to update were either plugins or higher end motion graphics or higher end sound, none of which mattered within Final Cut. I needed better tools from Logic. I needed better tools from After Effects. I needed better, let's say, green screen. Well, why would I do that in Final Cut if it's, I always say use it for its strengths, not its weaknesses. If After Effects does this better, do it there and then bring it in. The rest of the world hates that. They're like, why? When you could just do it in, round trip in Premiere or whatever. It's really about the kind of chef you are and how you cook. And I'm a little old school and I still believe in taking the best tool of everything. I'm a car lover. I got a Mustang in their garage. I don't go get everything at American Muscle. I buy a different part from every single vendor in the world. But you could argue that I could get all of that in one website. And so, at that point, I just think Final Cut has been such a great everyday solid thing. And I don't need all those bells and whistles all the time. I don't do HDR editing that much. I don't do 360. The day I do, they're no longer the platform of choice because there's people dominating that and I'd move to them.
Although there is actually support for both of those things in Final Cut. I'd have to say, to be the devil's advocate on this is like, how many of those bells and whistles that Adobe puts out were needed in any way? They're inventing things and they're making, like you said, magic. They're making things that are really, really awesome. Don't get me wrong. But are they tools you're going to use all the time? And some of them, yes. Like if you're making something that will transform the way I look at an edit or the way I achieve or complete an edit, that's one thing. You give me a tool to fix some kind of problem that I have that I come across a lot, that's great too. But like I actually think the forward thinking of Apple tends to serve them well over time. Like the MacBook Pro, they hadn't updated it for a really long time, and then when they released it, didn't look too much different than the last one. Just had new inputs, but they're forward thinking of USB-C, and it's like just USB-C's been out on Thunderbolt for them. Thunderbolt. I always get Thunderbolt Lightning confused. But that what am I going to do with all my ports? Yeah, people have been carrying around dongles forever now, but all of a sudden now everything's on that. And like for me, it's like, oh man, I hated that laptop, but now all of my peripherals all interface with it just fine. And man, that's really awesome. And this computer that's 5 years old is actually like as good as the thing I'm going to get because they were so forward thinking. But for 5 years, it was a pain in the butt. And I think that with going from 7 to X with Final Cut, they changed it so significantly that people are like, this isn't the way my mind wants to accept this. But then those that had an open mind and were willing to accept the magnetic timeline, it's like, oh, it's just that. And then everything else wasn't really that significant. And then, they made this solid thing that maybe doesn't need those updates. Now, I think, I imagine Apple's actually just choosing not to invest in those spaces. And,
Yeah,
and they realize that, maybe it wasn't selling more computers for them. So they're not going to spend as much money as Adobe that just sells software to, do those things. Adobe needs to justify themselves. It kind of reminds me of my grandfather once told me, he says, a union needs to justify their necessity in the workplace. And if they don't, what's their purpose? Why are they even there? And inventing new reasons for you to need them isn't a justification. It's just another, it's like, oh, that's good. They're still doing that or whatever. You might not need those new bells and whistles from Adobe. You might not need anything other than it to be more, robust in the way of like, it doesn't crash. Like, I don't know how many times I have H.265 footage and the thing gets so mad at me. Now, is that an Adobe problem? Is that an H.265 problem? I actually think it's an H.265 problem.
Really?
Well, it's like we just need better computation, whatever, because H.265 gets mad in everything. It's just to decode it. It's really efficient to encode, but decoding H.265 is very labor intensive. So I think that's the big deal, because I can deal with 12-bit RAW better than I can deal with 10-bit H.265.
Well, and nowadays they're chewing on some much different stuff, right? It's just so much more to it that it has to process. But I know I've referred a lot to DJing in this interview. I didn't thought I would, but you could say that we are no different than the ones who are using all the digital stuff. And then the biggest, baddest DJs, they still want a Technique 1200 from 1999. Yeah. Just about every DJ uses that turntable on the planet. And if you're using a controller, they don't respect you. And I think that's Final Cut. Like Final Cut is a controller, and people they deem it that way. Like, oh, it doesn't have enough tools. It doesn't have what the turntable has. And then all the big ones, the turntables, they have the turntable and the controller in their arsenal. But what I've realized in all the years I DJ is I don't need to carry big crates and turntables everywhere I go. And so that ability to use the controller in more places and in more scenarios is what makes it cool to me. And the day that that's no longer cool to me, I will have to go to whatever other options are available. And they're always available, right, guys? I mean, at the end of the day, it's all about what do you like? What flavor ice cream do you like? What kind of hats do you like to wear? What's your team? I like Final Cut. Listen, I've been really trying to move to Resolve for a while. I do all my YouTube stuff in it on purpose to try to force myself into it all the time. But most of my client work, they require me to do it in Final Cut because they either want me to work with their editor or they want something. I haven't had the Premiere pressure yet. That was more for indie film time. Everybody was working in Premiere. Guess why? Because Avid was something that only Hollywood was playing in again. And so it gave a lot of indie filmmakers, if I go to Premiere, I can stay cutting indie films and short films. So it's just, what world are you going to edit in? If you're doing a wedding, Final Cut's amazing. But if you're doing a short film, maybe Adobe Premiere is the one you want to go in for the tool sets and the ability to work within AE. And if you're a compositor, you're going to love all the Adobe updates because they're constantly updating for compositors and the ability to eliminate things and, hide an entire person just by drawing a circle around them. You don't need that in every small wedding, but you definitely need that in a film to hide a rig, for example, or something. So man, it's just all about what you like.
I always think that those restraints, so like that you don't have, I use, it's called Isotope RX. I think we're on 8 now. And it's just an amazing audio repair tool. You can remove digital distortion. Really cool. That's awesome. But if you don't create digital distortion, you don't need this tool. And so, it's like, if I don't have that tool to fix it, maybe I'll shoot it, I'll actually capture it correctly. I'm a drummer. I laugh when you see someone at a small gig with like a 9-piece drum set. It's like, you're getting paid $50 to fill your whole car with the drum set. And you can't even bring your girlfriend. She's got to take a ride with somebody else because they couldn't fit in there. And you thought it was all impressive. And all you used is your snare and your hi-hat all night. It's like, do you really need that? Those sometimes those creative restraints that we have of limitations to our equipment, to our tools, to our, maybe hopefully not technique, that we can creatively get out of those. It used to be that, as a video producer, that you had a lot of problems to deal with. You had to, what's the workaround around this? And that was just kind of part of the process, and we've gotten to the point where we have a lot of tools that don't have those workarounds, but you doesn't mean you shouldn't flex that creative problem solving muscle, because that's the thing that's going to get you out of that really big jam. Is like, oh, I know I can use it this way. And then all of a sudden you're like, oh, I have no problem now. Whereas the answer would have been what? Buy more equipment. I mean, yeah, you can always spend money, but that doesn't make you money. It's just going to be something you have to make up for.
Man, your mic drop moments when you said, if you just don't do it wrong, you don't have to fix it. My whole career with anyone I've ever hired has been like, care more and I have to care less. You
Yeah.
just got to care more up front. And then don't have to care as much when I don't have to fix it. I always used to tell people, editing to me is not repair. Editing should be enhanced.
Yeah.
I should always be enhancing something, not fixing it. And I think that the problem is people have learned that we can fix. And so then we become fixers instead of enhancers of things. And listen, the tool sets are getting so good. The way you can record audio in the field now, the way you can record, even like I said, we talked about Osmos and little cameras. We talked GoPro last time we talked, Chris.
Yeah.
There's just so many ability now, and the quality is so high. They're literally making like more like idiot proof. Like it's,
I truly think that's their effort too, is they're trying to make it idiot proof. They want to make it easy for anyone.
Well, they're making it for people who are not, filmmakers or videographers, right? So Niel, we're coming up on time. I want to ask you our typical question, our typical exit question here, which is, if you had one secret that you would give to editors to basically help them be better editors or help them grow in their career, what would that secret be? What do you got for us?
To me, it's it's going to sound like a dude, really, like that's your answer. But what I've learned in my 30th year of editing is that organization is more important than anything in the planet. Like how you approach an edit. The mastery of editing to me is before you start. So my advice, my secret that I do to try to make my life easier, especially in our case where we do every kind of editing, sound, compositing, video, I approach them all identically the same. I have a very I shouldn't say fixed, but a very important structure of how I organize folders, how I organize sound. I pay a lot of attention to selects that are going to be for compositing versus just they're in the, let's just use a wedding as an example, since a lot of your audience does that. So I would approach it and say, listen, there's wedding footage and then there's the stuff I want to make hot. And the way I organize that now will make making it hot so much easier in 3 hours when I want to get to that composite versus reusing that same footage. And then, am I going to mess up the original? Is it going to copy? Is it going to mess up? So my advice is before you even ingest it, think about where it's going to go to give you the best and smoothest workflow. Then organize it really well and try to previs your video a little bit so that you can kind of say, I might need that drone shot for this really great composite that I'm going to do where I'm going to blur the end and fly in the text. So let me make a copy of that now so I don't have to even mess with the master later. Let me go ahead and stick it in a folder called comps, right? So without going around in circles, my secret is if you make it easier before you start, instead of starting to work, you can start to play and you can just work and have a good time. And then that organization will also help you, like Chris was saying, when things get a little tough. And instead of having to go, oh my God, how am I going to fix this? You're like, wait a minute, I've got a folder that I have called comps where I do all these really dope shots and I'm going to go get those now. And that's going to be my fix. I'm going to fix it with that. And I've found that gives me a lot of parachutes when there's a whole lot of bombing going on and things going wrong. And it gives me some options versus, oh no, I got to go to the client and make an excuse of why I can't fix this thing.
That's some really good advice. I always think of it as editors, we're figuring out the puzzle. The puzzle doesn't exist yet, right? But if you have a puzzle that is really, really hard with lots of pieces, what do? You take out all the edges and you put them aside. You go, oh, these are all blue. I'm going to put them all aside. So when you get to the blue section, you just have the blue section to work on. When you have the, whatever it is, you're finding those puzzle pieces. And one, it's really satisfying to go, I have this hole in my story that I need to put something here that's taking me from A to B or A to C. I need to find B. And you are organized enough that you have a folder full of ideas for B. It's not just that one that you thought would fit there. It's like, no, I have a couple options here to see which one is even the best. It's not just achieving it. It's how to make this the best it can be. And that's really great when you're going, okay, do I like A, B, or C? I mean, what a great choice when you're going, I have a great option. I have 3 great options to go with. I'm trying to choose the best. That's way better than like, which one is this actually, can I actually even achieve this? And I think that organization is always going to pay off in the speed of which you're creating, but also in like, your ability to vet all the paths that you could take to make sure that it was the strongest path all the way to the end.
And then you're focusing on the storytelling. And I think the word workflow, I talked about this on All Things Post, the word workflow gets overused. I actually think it should be backwards. Your flow determines your work. If you set up your flow up front, you will have easier work, or you'll be able to focus, like you said way early in our interview, on the storytelling, right? On the arc. If you design your flow before you ever started, you can now focus on being a storyteller, not a puzzle piecer, puzzle maker per se. So I always say workflow should be flow work, because your flow will determine the level of hard or simpler work. But look, people today want to jump in. They want to just drag transitions and pre-made stuff, and they want to get it done quick. And that is the enemy of creativity, is speed. Sometimes it's because getting it done quick doesn't mean it's going to get done well or creatively, right? So that's my advice, is, come up with a great flow that works for you, not what works for somebody else. And that would hopefully make work be more fun, even when there's challenges in it.
Yeah, that's great advice. I think, anyone who has been editing for a while eventually experiences this feeling of like drowning of just in files, like clips and graphics and sound. And, you're doing this, this hunt for like, oh, I could swear I had this shot, and it can be overwhelming. So organization is absolutely key.
All you're doing by cutting things up is making more things.
Yeah, exactly.
Right? So like as you go, you should have more assets as you go. Yeah. And so you're gonna drown yourself, right? If you're not keeping that going. And that's a great analogy.
What you're editing.
Okay, Niel, thanks so much for giving us some time today. It was a great conversation.
It's been an honor, guys. Thanks again. And again, it's been a really great full circle for me, starting to read this and now being able to talk with you guys about this 30 years later in my career. It's kind of a cool thing. I just want to encourage everybody out there to keep editing, keep storytelling. And at the end of the day, that's what matters, is your body of work.
All right, Niel, thanks so much. Thanks, everyone, for listening. We'll catch you next time. Big thanks to our guest, Niel Guilarte, for joining us. You can check out his podcast, All Things Post Podcast, on all of the podcast platforms there are. So just check out All Things Post. Do a search for that and you'll find it. You can also find him on Twitter at Niel Guilarte. That's Niel. And on Instagram at Niel J. Guilarte, where you can see all of his exploits there. So if you've been listening to the podcast and you enjoy it, we would love it if you gave us a written 5-star review on iTunes. We're trying to collect those. It'd be a really big help for the podcast, and hopefully it's authentic as well. We will only want real authentic reviews. So for Chris Monlux and everyone here at Videomaker, I'm Mike Wilhelm, and you've been listening to the Videomaker podcast. We'll catch you next time.